welcome back. So today we thought it might be fun to look at different ways of drying different plants and herbs and teas and stuff to enjoy over the winter. So when you look at your gardens right now, behind me I have a whole bunch of kale. There's no way I'm going to be able to eat all of that. And because it's the fall, we're into October now, we could be getting frost. Kale actually is one that can survive the frost, but a lot of the plants that are out here, once the frost comes, it's going to kill the plants. So now is a great time to go and harvest what you can in the gardens and just dry them. So we're gonna look at two different ways of drying herbs. One of them is just hanging them in your house. So you don't need anything fancy, yarn or string or jute or anything like that. You just kind of tie them up and you can hang them anywhere. And usually, depending on what it is, in a couple of days it's dry, and then you can just take the leaves off the stem, put them in jars or Ziplocs or paper bags, and enjoy them all winter long. The other thing that we're going to look at is dehydrating. So I have a pretty nice dehydrator that a friend of mine gave me. He wasn't using it anymore, so I was happy to take it off his hands. But before that, I found 2 or 3 really nice dehydrators at Value Village over the years. So you might know people that have a dehydrator that would lend it to you for a couple days, or you could go to Value Village or a secondhand store and see what they have. So let's get started.
This one here is lemon verbena, and it's not a perennial in our zone. It's only perennial further south. So I'm going to be able to cut all of this to dry. If I waited until after frost, the frost would damage the leaves and it wouldn't be good for tea, but this is a delicious tea. So I'm cutting quite low on the plant to get a big branch like that. And I'm going to cut all these branches and hang them somewhere warm and dry. And the nature of this plant, you can see there's lots of space around those leaves. As long as you keep lots of space around those leaves, it's going to dry in the air just fine. It doesn't need any extra help. But plants are different. Some are wetter plants and they need more help from you to not go moldy in the drying process.
And Julia, something like this you could just hang in your house?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I often have my bedroom walls decorated with plants that are dry. We've got 2 projects, drying things for tea and drying things to make a green smoothie powder. The green smoothie powder will include some kale leaves. Kale really just breaks off easily. Again, like I said, I would not harvest kale for drying when it's this soaking wet, but this is just the demonstration. And I'll take some borage to dry. Borage has these ones are purple, often they're more blue, and the flowers and the leaves are really nutritious for the adrenal system to help your body cope with stress. So everybody needs some of that. And this one, I think will probably end up in our green smoothie powder, but it could end up in a tea or it could end up in a salve, another project that we'll show you in a later video. Here's some Italian parsley or flat leaf parsley. We put some of this in our fresh smoothie today already. This one here is lemon balm. This one, it's a European plant, but you find it in a lot of kind of urban wild places, even in parks. Maybe a gardener let it go to seed and it just stays there. So it has a lemony flavor. It's good for tea. It's good to dry and put in smoothies or teas, and it's antiviral. So it's good against chicken pox and cold sores. Pretty good thing to have on a regular basis throughout the winter. These ones are calendula. They are fantastic herbal medicine for your skin And for internally as well, especially for conditions like irritable bowel syndrome, they're really soothing to your intestinal tract. So you can dry them and make tea, or you can dry them and make a salve, and we'll show you how to do those. So I will pick a lot of these today to dry for the medicines we're going to show you how to make. But I will only dry these when they're drier than this, because they still have too much dew on them and they might go moldy if I pick them right now. This is another really easy to grow one. And once you grow it, you have so many seeds. Really easy to share with your friends and grow in sunny places. This is lavender. And we already did a cut of the flowers earlier in the year and dried those ones. But often with flowers, they have such an urge to make baby plants. If you take away their flowers and their seeds, they're gonna do it again. And so here's our next flush of beautiful lavender flowers. And these are, my daughter loves them in our homemade herbe de Provence when we make our blends of oregano and sage, thyme, dried basil, and other herbs. So we put that in that, but I'll probably put these in salve. You can also make a tea out of it. You can use it for lots of art projects. And there's a few different ways with these. They have the long stems and they're actually quite good at drying. So if you cut them lower down, it makes it easier to make a nice bundle and just hang it somewhere and dry your little bundle like that.
Here's an area with more greens that we're going to dehydrate for our green smoothie. So this is just a different type of kale, the Russian red kale. This is an example of the dino kale. We have some Swiss chard that's growing here, which will be really nice. This is a different type of parsley. So we're going to gather a whole bunch of different types of greens and we're going to dehydrate them for our smoothie powder. Okay, so this is my dehydrator, and when you take off the cover, most dehydrators are going to look something like this. Could be a different shape, different size, but you're gonna have a lot of trays that are really close together. This is great if you're cutting up beets or tomatoes or bananas or things like fruits and vegetables that you're cutting really thin, and you cut them thin, you lay them out on the tray like this, and then they slide in there, and there's lots of area for the air to circulate while it's trying to dry it out. In our case, because we have our greens and they're really big and fluffy, this isn't gonna work so well. I used to try to get them all on these trays and try to push down the leaves enough to get in there, and then I got smart. So now what I do is I take out most of the trays. For today I'm going to just leave 2 in. So I'm gonna leave one sort of halfway, and that way we can pile a bunch of greens in here and a bunch of greens in here. I'm gonna pull this out for a second to show you. At the back of the dehydrator is a fan. I think maybe the motor's back there, I don't know, but it's covered with a mesh, and I'm sure whatever yours looks like, it will be something sort of similar, where you don't, I wouldn't want to jam it so full that there's things poking in here. This needs to be able to circulate and have air. The other thing is, even though we're going to put a lot of greens in here, they're fluffy and airy, and there's lots of room for the air to circulate. When we start putting our greens in, you're gonna see I'm not shoving them together and packing them really tight. For a dehydrator to work, there needs to be room for the air to circulate. Okay, so let's start putting our greens in here. So this is at the halfway mark. I just wanted to stop and show you so you can see we have the borage. We have 3 different types of kale in here right now. There's the Swiss chard. There's 2 different types of parsley. There's basil in there. So I have kind of filled it loosely, half full. And then I'm going to put this second one on, just kind of tuck this down. And then I'm going to fill up the second half. And now the second half is done. You can see this was the lemon balm that we harvested earlier this morning. This is the broadleaf parsley. I think I mentioned there's 3 different types of kale in there, but there's a really beautiful assortment of greens. I want you to notice how many greens there are, because you are going to be amazed at how small they become when you dehydrate them. I know the first time I did this, it gave me an appreciation for how expensive green powder is when you buy it in the grocery store, because it takes a lot of greens to make even a small amount of greens powder. So here is what it looks like the following morning. So it hasn't quite been 24 hours, but you can see that it has gone down quite a bit in size. So the next step is I took one of those little trays, emptied it into a bowl, and you can hear how dry it is. Obviously, I washed my hands first, and I'm just going to crunch it. Try to crunch it down into a powder. Now, some of this isn't crunching, like this is a piece of Swiss chard. It's a bit thicker than the other things. It won't crunch because there's still too much moisture in it. So I'm going to put this back into the dehydrator for a little bit longer. Everything else is feeling pretty dry. So I wanted to show you some examples of just hanging them in the house. This is the lemon verbena. This is just a coat rack that I have as soon as I come in the house. I'm just gonna leave that hanging there for a couple of days. I have a beautiful lemony smell as soon as I walk into the house, but you will be amazed at how quickly this is going to dry. Here's option 2. This is on the back of a doorway. I got these lovely door hooks at the dollar store, I think. They just flip over the top of a doorway and you can just hang them on the back. And this one is an example of me just putting a tiny pinprick in the wall with a tack. Don't know if you can see it. Oh, just popped a tack in the wall and hung it that way. And this is an example of something you can do with your lavender. So you could tie it together like we did with the lemon verbena and hang it upside down. But I normally just look for little glasses or vases and just put it inside and let it dry out that way. This particular lavender is from last year. So I tend to collect little tiny jars and just dry out sprigs of lavender and have them sporadically throughout my house. They still smell like the lavender is really beautiful. So you don't have to tie it and hang it upside down. You can just pop it in a glass or a jar and let it dry out that way. And this is 4 days later. So obviously it depends on your house, how dry it is, how much moisture is in the air, but it doesn't take very long for this kind of like leaves to dry. So I have the option of putting this into a blender and blending it into a powder. But for me, for teas, I kind of like it like this. So we had those big branches. You can hear how crunchy this is now and dry. I just popped all the leaves off, put them in a bowl, and I'll use this for tea this week. So again, it's a really great way. This isn't going to take up a lot of room. With all of those branches that we used, I'll be able to fit all of those leaves into maybe 2 or 3 jars, and I will have plenty of lemon tea throughout the winter. Okay, so this is our greens powder. And just to remind you, when we started out, we filled this entire bucket was overflowing with greens, and now it's down to half a jar. So that just gives you an idea. It's a great way to take a massive amount of greens and make it really tiny. easy to store in your cupboard. For me, I'll take like, you know, maybe half a teaspoon of this, put it in my smoothies. You can put it in soups or stews or pasta sauce, anything like that. But as you can see, a little bit of the powder goes a long way. It comes from a lot of greens. So this is a nice way to save your greens for the winter. I hope that was helpful, and I look forward to hearing some stories about some of the plants that you guys are putting away for the winter. Thanks so much.